Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. This is Hashim Duale, your host, and this is your show, Autism Awareness. You see, the Ramadan, mashallah, is a very blessed month. I don't know how, when it went, and today we are on 29. Can you believe? And this is the last show. Let's really make out of it all we can today. I have very exciting program for you as we put it on the show list, and you have seen all around the world. I have a very good guests here. Let me start first. My regular one, Dylan Matson Dots. Today,
Hello.
Dylan has been with us whole month, and I'm grateful to him. Today, he will be my backup rather than me talking all the time. But we have wonderful speech therapist, Alison Templeman. Alison, you're today our guest. First, how you find our studio and the environment that so far you've been in?
Hello, yes. Very different to my typical working day. So, yeah, I didn't really know what to expect, to be honest. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. And we will be talking to you about two subjects. One, we covered before with your colleague, Chat Autism, because there were a lot of questions came back from our viewers. And today, in very layman way, you will be explaining to us how people can get. And in the meantime, we're expecting also our guest, Professor Ashkar Farouqi, who's a GB, and he's also involved in many research here. He's OBE, he's a non-executive director of CBI, among others. He's a very humble man who wants always to help the community, and he will be coming in from 12:30. Okay, first question, as we left with your colleague before, Chat Autism, what it is, if you can explain in terms that everybody can understand. And by the way, you can follow this show on FM 87.7 if you are in Leicester, and you can also follow us on Twitter. You can follow us on everywhere, Facebook, and it's live also
And YouTube.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Chat Autism is a service for the people across Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. And we are a chat text messaging service for anybody who has got any queries really about autism, or in terms of either if they themselves are diagnosed or on the pathway to being diagnosed, or if they are supporting somebody who is autistic, or again is on the pathway of getting a diagnosis. So I'm part of the specialist autism team in LPT, in Leicestershire Partnership Trust, and the Chat Autism service is manned by one of my colleagues at any one time. So we're open Monday to Friday, 9 till 5. We are closed on bank holidays and weekends. And we can offer advice and signposting, and it's always from a health professional and from a member of the specialist autism team.
For example, Dylan has a question about anything. For example, he typed a question. What sort of question?
Just throw me in there, why don't
yes,
you?
why not?
I think my main question that I first brought up when I heard about Chat Autism, I mean, I've been involved with it. As you know, I've been involved with Autism Space, getting it launched and ready, and I've loved every part of it. I love Chat Autism for what it is. And the main thing I love is the fact that you don't need a diagnosis.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that, for me, is the highlight about Chat Autism, because a lot of services out there, you need a formal diagnosis. And, of course, for people who self-diagnose, like, I'm still mixed on self-diagnosis myself, but, of course, for people who... It's a 3-year waiting list, if I remember correctly.
Something
in Leicestershire,
like that,
isn't
yeah.
it? It's like a 3-year waiting list. So for people who can't wait that long, actually having a service they can access is fantastic. I think my question would be, what about the weekends?
I mean, like I say, we are Monday to Friday. I think the thing is because we're not a crisis service, so we do have a bounce back text message on those times that we're closed, so bank holidays and weekends, that does give people other services that they can access if they feel that they need more urgent support. So particularly if somebody's struggling with their mental health, for example. We are quite a small team, and
well, there's 3 of you that I remember. I think I met you all in person in late February at the event at the NSPCC.
So the digital team do most of the chat autism support, and me and my colleagues in the specialist autism team, we cover on a bit of a rota. So there aren't that many of us. We are a really small team. And because our service is not a crisis service, it's the idea is that there are, that people would be able to kind of wait, which I know is frustrating. I know it would be much better if there was that more immediate response.
Well, at the end of the day, you can't control that. Like, as long as you are able to give advice, that's the most important thing. And it may take 24 hours. Like, that's perfectly understandable.
Yeah.
But if I'm a parent and my 23 years old child who is not verbal, I find something that I wanted to put it in there for advice as a parent. What's the time frame that I would expect back? I take the point that you're saying it's not an emergency service and it's not quicker that way. But
you could, we do kind of say that it's, you would expect a response within 24 hours. However, it is very, very unusual that we wouldn't have anybody able to staff chat autism, and generally we are fairly quick at replying. Like I say, our service is 9 to 5. If you're texting in with quite a complex query at maybe kind of 4:30, then we might say, okay, we might have to roll this over to the next day. But generally, we will respond fairly quickly. If we are doing chat autism that day, then that's what we're down for, and that's what we're kind of waiting for the text messages to come in. So we're generally pretty quick with responding.
Can you invite our people to call in and what numbers they need to do with Dylan? Yes.
You have a better glance than I do, Hashim. Yes. And so if people want to call in with their questions, they can call us on our studio line at 0116 482 2086. Or if you want to send us a message on WhatsApp, please message us at 07748 855 055.
You see, you can do it better than me. That's why I always ask you to do it.
You have a better glance than I do.
Okay, next time we swap the chairs. As I was saying then, there are some teenagers, and the reason I do this is they hate a face-to-face meeting or talking to people.
Yeah.
And it is something good for that people, especially that age, the millennium age. They rather text. For example, if and they are independent nowadays. For example, I'm talking about 17 years onwards, and they want to talk to you directly. Is that information will be shared with their carers and parents, or that information will be for them only?
So generally, the vast majority of the time, we don't know the person that is texting in. So we will send them, as soon as they text in, we will send a reply with some confidentiality information. And that will say that, obviously, if we are concerned, if they raise a risk that we are concerned about their safety or somebody else's safety, we would escalate that. But we do have this confidentiality agreement that we ask people to read. It's only a few lines. It's not a huge amount. But just to say that if we were concerned about a risk to them or a risk to anybody else, then we would escalate that, obviously. But the majority of the time, we don't know the person that is texting us, so it won't necessarily go on their record. If they shared with us who they were, then we had enough evidence to know who they were. Then we would put that on their health record, for example. But the majority of the time, people will text in and say, how old they are, or what it is they're asking, who they're asking it for, and we will give that advice.
It's available only to Leicester, Leicestershire, and Rutland.
Yes, yeah.
So I'm sorry, those who are watching from us elsewhere.
Yeah.
This service is only for Leicester, Leicestershire, and it is first in its kind in UK. That's what I heard.
Yeah, we do understand that we are one of the first ones. So there are other chat services out there. So, for example, there are health visiting. So for sort of under fives, there is a chat health service that I think was started in Leicestershire that has now spread to other areas. But in terms of an autism specific service, yes, we believe we're the first ones. We have had some inquiries from other trusts in the country who are interested in finding out more about how it works. So hopefully it is something that will become more widespread.
I mean, I was about to ask, what is the plan on it going nationwide? Because, of course, there are going to be parents across the country who could do this, and potentially even internationally. This is something that's going to be so big.
Yeah.
Leicestershire, in comparison, is so small as a starting point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there are obviously some of our services like Autism Space. Obviously, anybody can access that. Obviously, a lot of the information will be specific to Leicester and Leicestershire and Rutland, but anybody can access that. So, but yeah, I mean, it is really frustrating sometimes when somebody does text in and it turns out they're not from our area, and we can't carry on supporting them, which is really upsetting. But hopefully, if we
is there a planned expansion? Does that make sense?
It depends on other trusts, basically. Okay. So if other trusts feel that it is a worthwhile service. So we're trying to get feedback. So at the end of every conversation, we'll ask somebody if they could text us any feedback. So we're constantly kind of collating feedback. We're looking at the themes that are coming through of what people are asking. Are we getting a lot of similar type questions? And if we are, do we maybe need to put more information out there on, for example, Autism Space? So we're constantly trying to gather the feedback, gather the data, so we can evidence that actually this is a really worthwhile service, which vast majority of the
I've checked out Autism Space again recently. I love it, 'cause, as you know, I've been helpful in getting it built up.
Yeah.
I constantly review it so I can see just how amazing that it is. Every time I get to talk to someone about it, I love being able to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example. One of the things that I love is about employment.
Yeah.
So the NAS did a survey a few years ago. It was 2022, I believe. It was less than 22% of autistic adults were in any form of paid employment.
It's shocking.
And it is shocking. But what I loved, though, is that on Autism Space, that we were looking at it, and they've even given helpful guides. And they mentioned the checklist, which was done by Cheshire's NHS Trust, about reasonable adjustments to help autistic adults into work. A whole different part of the NHS Trust, but something that actually Autism Space can acknowledge and bring in.
I'm sorry to cut you off. You get into the next question.
Yeah.
Autism Space, which is international, which can be. Can you explain to us that other service as well? Then we will come into all the other questions.
Yeah, so Autism Space is part of the LPT website. So literally you can go and Google LPT Autism Space and you will get taken to the page. It's just full of lots of advice, guidance, signposting on all sorts of different areas to do with autism. So yeah, like Dylan said, there's things there around employment, there's things to do with education, there's lists of support groups and organisations within Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. There's things about diagnosis, the criteria. There is so much on there. And our digital team are constantly revisiting it, working out what, and again, looking at the kinds of queries that we're getting on Chat Autism to establish, okay, so we're getting lots of people that are asking about this particular topic. Maybe we need to, you know, if we can put something on Autism Space about that, we can direct people to that and go into more detail. And also linking to other websites and other sources of support as well. So like you said about I think it's Cheshire and Wirral, isn't it? The employment checklist. So there's and all of the kind of sources that they link to, have been reviewed. So there's an awful lot of information on there, but it is set out, I think, in a reasonably accessible way. There's all the different topics and the different sort of headers, and people can go and read those articles.
I would agree with you. Again, I always think, like, I've got friends with autism in America, and they love to know what we have over here. Yeah. Because they don't have the same thing. So the idea of, okay, what can inspire them to maybe introduce the same kind of level of thing over there for them. So when they look at what we have, it's like a motivation for them. So
yeah, and I think it's a really helpful resource to signpost people too, because there isn't a huge, we know that for a lot of people that, they might struggle with that support once they have that diagnosis. Then it is a really good resource to be able to signpost people to.
And one of the things that I always wonder, who are behind that website, who's giving this expert experiences to the people, who are those people who are writing? If you can give us an idea, because I always tell people, please take the advice from legitimate NHS or government trust, because nowadays there are a lot of information out there who are putting astray communities. Who are your experts in advising on that chat?
On the
not autism space.
Yeah. So we have our digital team, and I think you have my colleague Natalie on recently.
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago she came.
Yeah. So she's part of the digital team. So the digital team is very small, and there are people so Natalie, for example, I think has a health visiting background, so has lots of experience working with families and young children. We've also got different clinicians. So obviously she's got a nursing background. We've got clinicians with a speech and language therapy background. And, we have got, I know certainly one member of the digital team who herself is autistic. I'm sure she won't mind me sharing that. And plus they link closely with us as the specialist autism team as well. So if they feel that there is a particular topic that one of our, because we're a very multidisciplinary team, we've got lots of different professionals working within our team. So if they felt that there was an article that would be relevant, for example, to do with eating. So we've got a dietitian on our team, so they might approach her to ask to support with doing that. So it's a very small team. It's probably much smaller than you think. It's probably, it is a very small team. But
and they have all the resources that NHS can offer, so I understand. You wanted to
I was going to say, like, I know a few of your team directly, because how long have I been working with people in your team? Like, it's been almost 10 years now. Yeah. So I know how small you guys are, and the work you do always astounds me. So.
Oh, that's really lovely.
So I particularly remember John Boosie.
Yes. Yeah.
I can't remember if it's Boise or Boosie, but
Boosie, I think. Yeah.
But like when we all organised an autism group in Market Harbour, he actually came down for the launch for it as well. And that kind of thing that's the exact kind of support that we need moving forward. So knowing that you do all of this on top, it's every time I hear about it, because I know how small you guys are, always astounds me. So
yeah, I think in comparison to the kind of autistic population, it is a very small team, but we're really trying to kind of get really valid and useful resources out there as much as we possibly can.
Let me come back to Chat Autism and Autism Space. It's not every day that you have a speech therapist in the studio. Sorry to put you on the spot, by the way. So, can you explain to us speech therapists, what they do for people who have difficulty in speaking and in general terms?
So I always think that the actual name speech and language therapist is sometimes a little bit misleading, just to start off with, just to be controversial. Because actually a lot of people that we work with, we are focusing on communication. So more than just focusing on speech and talking. And I've worked with lots of children over the years, and I've had people say to me, well, I don't know why the speech therapist is working with them because they don't talk. And you go, no, that's fine. And we might not be expecting that, but actually what we're working on is communication. So the kind of the speech and language therapist part of it. So we've got the speech, which is your kind of the output and the actual words and the sounds that you use. And then we've got the language bit, which is actually kind of what we actually do. And that is around understanding communication and understanding what's going on around you and how you express that. And there is a huge array of, there's a huge number of ways that people communicate and are and understand communication, and that is very much not limited to talking. So I think, like I say, I think speech and language therapist is a bit of a misnomer to start with.
I'm learning. You see, when we talk about speech, we mean about communication.
Yes.
You are enabling people to communicate. Yes. And speech is not always the means.
No, absolutely. And for a huge number of children, young people, adults, you know, that might not be the kind of the ultimate aim or the ultimate outcome. What we're looking to do is to support people with communicating what their wants and needs are at the level that is appropriate for them. And more often than not, actually, we are supporting the people around them in how to, you know, often I'm in kind of, even in this role and in my previous roles where I worked a lot more with children, you know, a lot of my work wasn't necessarily directly with a child or, you know, with that person. Actually, it's with the people who are supporting them and who are around them to actually adapt their own communication in order to support somebody else. And that's a huge amount of what we do, more than kind of direct one-to-one.
Do you mind if I actually mention the number for chat autism while we're here?
That would be lovely. I was panicking then.
We've been talking about it for a while. We've actually not brought the number up.
Do you know what? I was panicking somebody.
Good idea to do so.
I was panicking somebody would ask me the number, and I don't know it off by heart.
Do not worry. Okay, so for those of you who want to get involved, like who want to send a message to Chat Autism, don't forget it is Leicestershire and Rutland only, and Leicester City, of course. But the number is 07312 277 097. I'll say it again one more time. 07312 277 097. And that's the Chat Autism helpline.
Thank you. Dylan is also my co-producer, and that's why he's here. All the brains I don't have, he has it. And he's also controller. If I do mistake, he will correct me on air.
Excellent.
Going on the speech therapy, as you mentioned, speech is not only the words that it is form enabling the person to communicate better and needs and their wants, and also train around people who are the family. I learned that lesson a long time ago.
Yeah.
Because my son, bless him, Ismail, he's 23 years of age. And he used to be frustrated about not us understanding him, what he wants. And he developed a method of taking my hand, pulling me and pointing what he wanted. And then, okay, this is what you want. But nobody told me that time to use that occasion in teaching him. If he was pointing something out of the fridge, whether it was milk or whatever he wanted, if I pick up that and I say, look, is this milk that you want? And then next time, even if he cannot say the word exactly, he will attempt to use that. So those are the things that I advise parents in small children with limited verbal communication to teach them. So they will be less. So in parents in those situations, what will be your advice?
I think communication, I think communication throughout life, and I think especially for young children and children who are struggling with communication, I think the real key is connection. And we want to make communication motivating, we want to make it fun, we want to make it rewarding, and so actually we want to support people in communicating in kind of the easiest way for them. And I think in those situations, what we want to do is we really want to, in that way, your son's really very clearly communicating that he wants something out of the fridge, which is brilliant. So what we want to do is we want to really encourage that was a fantastic way of communicating. That was brilliant. He let you know what he wanted. And what we can always do is show them what that next step is. And that next step might be, like you said, modelling the word milk. Oh, milk, you wanted the milk. Here's the milk. So he's hearing lots of that word, so he knows what the next step might be. For some children, it might be using a symbol or a picture. So you might have on your fridge door.
Right? That's
So
No,
like
Bex.
So
Bex exchange.
I've learned a bit about Maxon. That's why I'm asking, because some of the people I've worked with in the past, they prefer it, and
yes,
there are a lot of parents out there who might not know what it is. So I'd rather.
So Makaton. So coming back to your point about the Makaton. So Makaton is a system. Makaton itself is actually a charity, and they have a signing and symbol system. So a lot of people talk about Makaton and they mean using signs. So Makaton have their own signs, but
so for example, with milk, you'd have the picture of a carton of milk.
So that would be more. So Makaton would be like the sign, so the actual physical sign. So you might do that sign for milk. And if you're using something, I know you mentioned PECS, the Picture Exchange Communication System. PECS is a very structured and very specific process of teaching that picture exchange. So you take the picture and you hand it over. A lot of what we do in reality is using symbols or pictures to support communication. So if it's expressive language, for example, so if it's somebody communicating that they want milk, we wouldn't necessarily need them to exchange it. They might point to it. They might take you, if you've got an array of symbols on the front of your fridge of things that are in your fridge, then they might take you and point to the
I always remember I was talking to my birth parents recently. My birth mum said to me at one point that, because I couldn't talk up until I was 4 years old, and at one point she said to me that when I wanted something, I would point and try and get it, that because I couldn't talk at the time, and if she didn't get the right thing, I would start screaming, because in my mind I'd pointed at the right thing. Why wasn't she getting it?
Yeah. And it is a real, it is definitely a real thing with that frustration, and that's what I mean about that. We need to connect, and we need to try and figure out what's going on in this person's world. We don't necessarily know why somebody's finding it so difficult to communicate. We just need to figure out a way of supporting that. And I think that how we respond to that is so important. And actually, we're not just holding out for them to say the word milk. Actually, we're going with whatever it is they're doing and really kind of praising that, because actually what we know is that all of these things that we could possibly put in place, so whether it's pictures, whether it's signs, whether it's using real objects, whatever it is, actually all of the evidence is that if we put those alternative means of communicating in place, if there is a possibility that somebody can develop speech, those things will only help. Because I know that
I think it is to do with how they communicate. So for example, again, there's a lot of autistic people who are non-verbal, but I always remember I was friends with an identical twin, and they once told me how they literally used to have their own language just for the two of them to throw everyone else off board.
Yeah.
And their mum eventually figured it out, and they were able to start communicating in their own language. And that communication is key.
Yeah.
So I suppose it's quite like that. I suppose it's like they're communicating language that makes a lot of sense to them, but we need to understand.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think as well, I think we sometimes forget as verbal adults, we forget that actually we have so many ways of communicating that aren't just the words we use. You know, we use our tone of voice, we use our body language, we use our facial expressions, we use our gestures. We do all of those things. We can't just expect children to use speech. Actually, we're using loads of different things. They might need to use loads of different things.
I always struggled with body language. And for those of you, when I first actually understood that I didn't get body language was David Cameron. When he used to do his talks, he used to do this thing with his thumb. He used to shake it down like that when he... But it wasn't a list. He wasn't doing 1 or 2 or 3 as part of a list. He would just do it in the middle of a speech. And I would have no clue what that meant.
Yeah.
I think it's the first time I even turned around to my parents and went, I don't get this.
Yeah.
Clearly, I don't understand body language because he's trying to say something with this. I have no clue what he's saying.
Yeah.
Thank you. I like the way that you put it. We don't want to think of why this person is not communicating. We need to remember helping them to communicate with us. They clearly communicating, but communicating with us and back to them. That's the main thing. We, the parents, we want, why my son is not talking? Why my daughter is not talking? No, we've been fixated by this why thing.
Yeah.
So you're going other way around today.
Absolutely.
I'm learning. Go on that thought, please.
Yeah, definitely. And I think and I think like you say, we do get fixed on this idea of speech being kind of, you know, the gold standard of communicating, and absolutely, because, you know, speech is probably the easiest thing for everybody else to understand. You know, if you're going to use Makaton signing or any form of signing system, you're relying on other people knowing that as well in order to get your message across. If you're going to use PECs or picture pointing or some sort of symbol system, you're relying again on other people understanding what that's about, and whereas the vast majority of people will understand speech. But I think it's about realizing and understanding that children will always use the way of communicating that is easiest for them. You know, they're not out to make their own lives difficult. You know, if they can use speech, then the chances are they absolutely will. You know, my son had a language today, and we used, you know, I kind of thought, oh my goodness, I'm a speech therapist, should probably do something about this. And so we introduced him to Makaton, and he had loads of signs by the time he was, you know, quite young. And actually, once he got the words, he dropped all the signs because actually the words were easier
for him.
They were quicker. They got a quicker response because everybody around him understood that. And so actually, and he doesn't sign at all now because that's, you know, that's his communication methods changed. But I think that's the thing, is that children will always use what is easiest for them. And actually it's our job to kind of figure out what is going to be easiest for them and going with that, so they get that idea that communication is rewarding and fun and engaging and, you know, something to be enjoyed, not just a test.
And I think part of it, of course, is it's not even just communication, though. You do have to assess body language. You do have to assess facial expressions. And one that I always struggled with as a kid myself, sarcasm.
Yeah. Well, sarcasm makes no sense.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And again, we can do it you can learn by tone of voice, but that's something I had to be taught. Like, half the difficulty is that all of these social skills, there's no lessons on them.
No.
Either you get them, you pick them up naturally, or you have to be taught them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I had to be taught them because I didn't understand at the time. And apparently, according to some of my friends, I'm a very sarcastic person now. So it's quite weird that someone who used to never understand sarcasm has become very sarcastic. But I always think of it like that. Like, I've been able to understand that expression because I had to learn it.
Yeah. And actually that takes a lot of work. And I think that is the other thing, if you are thinking about particularly autistic communication as people are getting older as well, or in children, is that actually there are so many kind of nuances to non-autistic or neurotypical communication, that it's just, if you try and break it down, it's wild. Like, it's, there is so much, and actually trying to, I think people underestimate that actually as an autistic person, you have got to work so much harder at that. So I think that's where it's really important.
Well, think about sayings. Think about phrases like, and I use this one quite, so I can explain the origin, but also how you used to stress me out, break a leg.
Yeah.
When you use
sounds
that in
horrible.
day-to-day language, like, if you've got an event going on, they say, hey, you'll be fine, break a leg. I used to think that was awful.
Yeah.
I'd be like, why is someone telling me to break my leg?
Yeah.
Now I know the origin. So for those of you who don't know, the phrase break a leg comes from the days of Elizabethan theatre, from the days of Shakespeare. And back in the day, instead of clapping to applaud, they used to stamp their chairs. So the idea of breaking a leg was actually to break the chair legs. That's how an actor knew they did a good job. And that's for me. Once I understood that, the phrase made so much sense, and I could start using it. I felt more comfortable using it because the origin and the phrase itself made way more sense to me.
After you learned the origin. The other point is that we expect someone like you coming in and do the wonders, we parents, and next day our child will speak and do whatever it is. So what it is that we expect from you, and what you want us from parents' point of view to do when you come to us and devise a plan or whatever it is?
What we really want to do as speech and language therapists is we want to empower parents, because ultimately we are not going to be the ones that are with your child most of the time. With the best will in the world, even with a very intensive speech and language therapy service, we're not going to be there all of the time. Whereas actually, as parents, you are the person who knows your child best as well. And you know your family and your setup and the kind of culture that you have at home. And actually, I think our job is about, obviously we always kind of tailor that advice to that particular child, that particular situation. But ultimately, this is something that we want parents to kind of take on board and feel like they're the ones doing this. We can give the advice, we can give, we've got the theory, we've got the understanding and the kind of the whys and the wherefores, but actually what we want to do is support you in supporting your child, because actually that is going to be the thing that makes the difference, the people that are around that child all the time.
So you want us parents to have that mindset. You are coming in to empower us, to help our child, and also those who are around us, whether it is schools or so. Your job is not coming and putting like a magic thing, and the next day our children will speak.
If I may add to that, you know how you were saying on a previous show about the way people view social workers.
Yes,
is that people are scared to communicate with them because they're viewed as, they're going to take your child away. And the whole point in its origin, it's never about that. It's about actually empowering you. I think that's half the problem, that when we have, especially autistic kids being put into care, there's going to be a fear, especially amongst the kids themselves, never mind the parents, but the parents too. Like that perception of a social worker, of a professional being involved, like to them, I suppose that suggests that they aren't that good at doing their job of being a parent. And for some people, that's very terrifying to admit.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, I think it is, like you say, it is all about empowering that parent and the people around them. So whether that's nursery or school or whoever that is, whoever is spending, the most time with that child, that's, and what we want to do is what works in one setting is kind of get that over to another setting. So actually, if something's working really well at home, okay, how can we do that in school? Or if something's working well in school, how can we put that into home? And children will always communicate differently in different situations because, there are different expectations on them. But yeah, I think that is the thing, is actually the thing that will make the difference is the little and often. And, we're not talking about, if we give strategies about, to try, then we're not talking about suddenly you've got to be doing that all day, every day. It's about building that in. So, okay, so can I practice doing this?
And also, I can imagine with professionals, it's about building that relationship.
Yeah, definitely.
Because at the end of the day, that, the reason professionals are involved is to help.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not to take your child away from you. It's actually to build a good relationship where you can understand your child understands you, and actually to help them in school. So I think half the difficulty is because it's never seen that way.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that needs to be worked on. And I don't know how to best phrase it, because again, I don't know how much you know, but I grew up in the care system. I went in and out of care. I went through 5 families before the age of 11.
God.
And I always remember, like, once I was in care and looking to move in my aunt and uncle, they were really understanding. But the previous care system didn't have a clue.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's it. It's literally, it's about building that relationship. It's tackling that perception of you're here to take the kids away. No, you're here to help them understand one another.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing. You do that, what you do to take them away is a last resort. It's actually what any of us want to do, is to build that relationship, to build that understanding.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Hashim, do you want to add to that?
Just one point before we conclude. As you put it today about the chat autism and chat autism space, chat autism.
Do you need to give the number again?
Yes, please.
Right. You ask a question, I'll bring it up. I've got it right now on here, okay? Right, I've got it. Sorry. I do apologise. I 16-digit passcode, because that's where my brain works. I need to have it that way. So for all of you who have forgotten, if you want to use the chat autism text line, it's 07312 277 097. And yes, me saying O instead of 0 is really weird, but starting with 0 it sounds no sense. I'll say it again. It's 07312 277 097 for chat autism.
That's correct. And the other thing, chat, the autism space is one also most important bit for international people, because we are international now. While Dylan is finding out the exact WW, for example, Dylan talked about the employment bit. Is there a place for parents to take advice and guidance if they have, for example, we often have overlook only the reaction of the child when they are showing symptoms of difficulties. Those point of view, we are making sure that people have a space to understand what are these things that they're looking at, other than concentrating the reaction of the child, what it is they need to do, parents on that situation. Is there anything on that point?
In terms of when, in looking at how a child's reacting, do you mean? Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is, and I think one of my biggest things with autism is understanding how autistic people perceive and kind of see the world in a different way. And I think one of the really interesting points is that So I think one of the kind of really interesting things to think about is how, like I say, how somebody is perceiving the world around them, and actually if we can kind of be a bit of a detective and figure out what it is exactly that they're struggling with, that can give us a real insight into why somebody might be having why an autistic child might be reacting in a particular way. So for example, I was reading a blog post recently that was really interesting. I think it's from an autistic speech and language therapist, and she was saying that until she got her diagnosis of autism, she never realised that non-autistic people don't struggle with the things that she's always struggled with. So, for example, going into a supermarket, you go into a supermarket and it's very echoey, it's loud, there are bright lights, there are these random announcements on the tannoy that are really loud, there are people in your space, and she found that hugely difficult to manage, and actually it would be something that she found so hard, and it would be such a huge thing for her to have to do, and she just never realised that other people didn't find that difficult.
I completely agree. Like, for example, when I've done what I've done, like I can go into that and I feel like I've had to just
Sorry to interrupt. We've been waiting. Our guest today, he's very busy, Professor Ashkar, and he's online now. Professor Farouqi, welcome, and we directly to the question, the research. If you can be very specific, why we need to be involved in health research.
Thank you, Hashim, and Assalamu alaikum to you and all your listeners. Thank you for inviting me on the program. Yes, I want to talk a little bit about research in the National Health Service. And the reason I want to talk to this particular audience is because currently we know that health is not equal for everybody. We know that many communities are getting less good health care and are getting more illnesses and even dying younger. And that is important for everybody to know. And one of the ways that we can improve this is to improve access to healthcare and to make sure that the healthcare that is being delivered is suitable for all communities. And we can only make sure this happens by making sure we do the right research. Anything new in the health service, the new treatment and the new technology is always introduced after research. So you need the evidence that it works. Unfortunately, all the research that is currently going on, most of it, does not happen in Muslim communities, does not happen in Black communities or African communities or Asian communities. So it's really, really important that all of us get engaged in research so that the new treatments will happen in Black communities as well. So the plea I want to make is that when people get an opportunity or they get asked to participate in research, that they seriously consider this.
As you said, the BAME community are underrepresented in research. Can you explain our listeners today, when we think of research, we're thinking only people think just one way. For example, in different research, whether it is questionnaire, whether it is a track, a trial. So can you go through all those different ways of taking part of research itself?
Of course. There are many, many different patterns. Questionnaires, so he might be asking the public about whether the healthcare is suitable for them, or whether they can access the healthcare, or whether the healthcare is near where they are. So that sort of information from questionnaires is really important, because if we know what the public wants, we can change our services to provide that. So that's one type of research. Then other types of research might be about new medicine. We might be trying new treatments for blood pressure, for diabetes, and we don't know how effective they are until we do the research. And it's important that everybody takes part. So, for example, if there is a new medicine for blood pressure or for diabetes, it doesn't work the same in everybody. Some treatments, they work better in Black people, some work better in white people. So if Black and Asian people don't participate, we won't know which treatments work best for them, which treatments we should give them. Because even the current treatments are available, your listeners will be surprised to hear that some diabetes tablets and some blood pressure tablets don't work very well in South Asian people or in Black people. So it's different from the wider community. It's important we take part in this type of research where new treatments are being evaluated. And sometimes new technologies are being evaluated. So, for example, there is one technology where you can measure the oxygen level by putting your finger in a probe. And it's important that everybody participates because it affects the reading. So if it's only just in Black people, that particular
Thank you very much.
And the same with vaccines. We are developing new vaccines, and it's important we test and evaluate those in all the population, so we can get the best treatment for all the people.
Thank you very much. We are out of time, and we'll make sure that my colleagues, other presenters will pick up this because this is not only a Ramadan radio, and we will be coming to this point. And thank you very because you were very busy today, and you were doing all those things, and you're supposed to be here in the studio, but we cannot dictate the workload that people like you who are getting last minute call are getting, but we are very grateful of your time. And thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. I'll be happy to come to your studios in the future.
I will make sure that I will speak to my colleagues. We are in the last 30 seconds of the program. It's been fascinating. What will be your concluding remarks in 10 seconds?
I think, like I said, it's about connection and making communication really as easy and rewarding as possible for any age.
Thank you. Dylan, this is our last show.
For
you
me,
and I.
it's literal. I can't believe it's the last show already. But the way I look at it is that, you need to finish. But it's been a pleasure. All these weeks, it's been a pleasure.